There are things in this world that we are told simply do not move. Mountains, skyscrapers, the bedrock beneath our feet, and the Cactus 117. In the spring of 2011, out on the red dirt plains of Oklahoma, the Cactus 117 wasn't just a machine. It was a cathedral of industry. It was an oil drilling rig, but that word, rig, it feels too small for what this thing actually was. Picture it, standing 150 feet into the air, a tower of lattice steel, etched against the wide, flat horizon. To understand what is about to happen, you have to understand the weight. The sheer, undeniable mass of it. We aren't talking about a car. We aren't talking about a tank. The Cactus 117 weighed 1.9 million pounds, almost 2 million pounds of hardened American steel. It was anchored deep into the crust of the earth. It had engines the size of pickup trucks, mud pumps that thrummed with a rhythm you could feel in your teeth, in your bone marrow. When you stood on the metal grating of the drill floor, surrounded by the smell of diesel and grease and crude, you felt safe. Because physics tells us, something that heavy, something that grounded, cannot fly. Gravity is a law. It isn't a suggestion. If you were one of the 12 men working the crew on that rig, you trusted in that weight. You trusted in that weight. You trusted the steel. You trusted that no matter how hard the Oklahoma wind blew, and Lord knows it blows, you weren't going anywhere. But there is a force on this planet that views gravity merely as a suggestion. There is a specific kind of violence, a specific swirling chaos that doesn't care about engineering. It doesn't care about bolts. It doesn't care about 2 million pounds of iron. We build our fortresses. We build our machines, and we tell ourselves we are the masters of our domain. But on May 24, 2011, out in the open fields west of Oklahoma City, we were about to be reminded in the most brutal way possible that we are just tenants, and the landlord was coming to collect. This is the story of the strongest wind ever measured on the face of the earth. This is the story of the strongest wind ever measured on the face of the earth. This is the story of the forgotten monster. May 24th. To understand the fear, the specific texture of the dread that hung over Oklahoma that morning, we have to rewind the clock. Not far, just 48 hours, 2 days prior, May 22nd, 300 miles to the northeast, in a town called Joplin, Missouri. You remember the name. You remember the images. An entire city, scrubbed off the map. 158 people dead. A hospital, stripped to its skeleton. The meteorological community, the scientists, the storm chasers, the forecasters at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, they were traumatized. There is no other word for it. They were staring at the satellite data on the morning of May 24th, with the ghosts of Joplin still screaming in their ears. They were exhausted. They were running on adrenaline and stale coffee. They had just witnessed the worst tornado disaster in modern history. And now, the atmosphere was reloading. Imagine being a forecaster that morning. You look at your computer screen. You see the dew points rising. You see the wind shear, the way the wind changes direction with height twisting, the atmosphere into a coiled spring. You look at the energy values, the CAPE, convective, available potential energy. It's the fuel for the fire. And the numbers, they aren't just high. They are off the charts. The Storm Prediction Center issued a high-risk outlook. Now, if you aren't a weather nerd, let me explain what high risk means. It is the DEFCON 1 of meteorology. It is a rare break glass in case of emergency warning. It means that major, violent, long-track tornadoes are not just possible. They are expected. It means people are going to die if they don't hide. 10 a.m. The air in central Oklahoma felt heavy, sticky. It's that feeling where the air is so thick with moisture, it feels like you're breathing through a wet wool blanket. The sky wasn't blue. It was a hazy, milky white. That's the humidity. That's the fuel. And over in the town of Piedmont, just northwest of Oklahoma City, life was trying to be normal. People were going to work. Kids were in school. It was a Tuesday in the Falcon Lake neighborhood, a quiet, upscale subdivision of brick homes and manicured lawns. The Hamil family was going about their day. Catherine Hamil, a mother, her boys, Ryan, 3 years old, and Cole, just 15 months. A baby. You can imagine the morning routine. The clatter of cereal bowls, the cartoons on the TV, the laundry piling up. They didn't know about the Cape values. They didn't know about the wind shear vectors over the southern plains. They didn't know that the atmosphere above their roof was turning into a loaded gun, pointed directly at their living room. Why would they? The sun was breaking through the clouds. It looked fine. But that's the trick. That's the deception of a high-end severe weather day. The morning is often quiet. Too quiet. Meteorologists call it the cap. Think of it like a lid on a boiling pot. A layer of warm air high in the atmosphere that holds everything down. It stops the clouds from growing. It lets the sun bake the ground, heating up the air near the surface, building up pressure, and pressure, and pressure, waiting for the lid to blow. And in Norman, at the National Weather Center, the experts were watching that lid. They were watching the satellite visible loop, looking for the first bubble, the first sign that the cap was breaking. Because they knew, once it broke, the atmosphere would explode. They looked at the data, they looked at the similarity to the setup that erased Joplin, and they realized something terrifying. They realized that Joplin might have just been the opening act. 12:30 p.m. The first agitated cumulus clouds begin to bubble up west of Oklahoma City. If you've never seen a supercell form, it is hypnotic and terrifying. It starts as a cotton ball, innocent, white, fluffy, but then it shoots upward, vertical, like a rocket. It hits the top of the atmosphere, the tropop, and it spreads out, creating that classic anvil shape. But today, on May 24th, the explosion was instantaneous. 2:00 p.m. Near the town of Hinton, Oklahoma, the cap breaks. The atmosphere releases all that stored energy at once. Radar screens across the state light up. A storm has initiated. And it isn't just a rain shower. It is rotating immediately. From the ground, if you were standing in a field near Hinton, looking west, the sky began to bruise, deep purples, sickly greens. The wind began to inflow, the grass leaning towards the storm, as if the storm was inhaling the landscape, feeding itself. 3:15 p.m. The supercell is mature. It is a beast. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. This is where the forgotten monster begins to hide itself. You see, most tornadoes, the ones you see in movies, the ones you see on the news, are visible. You see the classic gray cone dropping from the cloud base. You can track it. You can see it coming. But the storm forming over El Reno that day was different. It was high precipitation. HP. It was a rain-wrapped monster. The humidity was so high, the moisture was so extreme, that the tornado was hidden behind a curtain of torrential rain and hail. To the naked eye, to a family looking out their window, it didn't look like a tornado. It didn't look like a tornado. It just looked like a dark gray wall of rain. But inside that rain, something was spinning. Something was spinning. Something was tightening. 3:50 p.m. The storm moves east. It is crossing over Interstate 40. The National Weather Service issues a tornado emergency. This is different from a warning. A warning means take cover. A tornado emergency means catastrophe is imminent. The language they used was chilling, larg, violent, and extremely dangerous. Tornado. But still, you couldn't see it. The storm chasers were struggling. They were driving through hail the size of baseballs, blindly trying to get a visual on the circulation. They knew it was there. The radar was screaming it was there. The velocicuplet, the red and green pixels right next to each other on the screen, was glowing like a neon sign. But out the windshield, Just gray. Just rain. 4 p.m. The storm is approaching the Cactus 117 rig. The 12 men on the crew. They are tough men. Roughnecks. They've seen storms before. They work in the elements. But the foreman, he's watching the sky. And he's listening to the radio. He hears the voice of the weatherman cracking with panic. He hears the words El Reno. He hears headed northeast. He looks at the rig. 1.9 million pounds. He looks at the shipping container they use as a safety shelter. It's anchored to the ground. It's steel. It's supposed to be safe. He makes the call. Shut it down. The engines power down. The roar of the drill fades. And in that silence, they start to hear it. It wasn't a roar. Not yet. It was a low frequency vibration. A thrumming. Like a subwoofer playing a note too low for the human ear to fully hear, but the body can feel it. The chest cavity vibrates. The water in the water bottles on the desk starts to ripple. The sky to the southwest turns pitch black. Not the color of night, but the color of nothingness. The crew moves towards the shelter. They leave the rig floor. They leave the controls. They step into the steel box. They latch the door. 12 men, huddled together in the dark. And outside, the wind begins to change. It stops blowing across the prairie. It starts blowing towards a single point. The monster has touched down. But here is the thing about this specific tornado. Here is the detail that keeps scientists awake at night. It wasn't just spinning. It was accelerating. Most tornadoes grow slowly. They widen gradually. This thing, it went from a narrow funnel to a mile-wide grinder in the blink of an eye. And it was hungry. It was chewing up the earth. It wasn't just breaking trees, it was stripping the bark. It wasn't just blowing dirt, it was scouring the soil down to the bedrock. And it was heading straight for the Cactus 117. 4:15 p.m. Inside the shelter. The men can hear the hail starting. The hair. The hail karts its takire. Ping, ping, slang, golf balls, then baseballs. Slamming into the metal sides of their refuge, the noise is deafening. But underneath the hail, a new sound rises. It sounds like a waterfall. A massive, endless waterfall. A massive waterfall. Or like a million heavy stones being tumbled in a dryer. That is the sound of debris. That is the sound of the earth being ripped apart. The pressure drops. Your ears pop. Painfully. The air gets sucked out of the room. And for the first time, the men inside that box realize that the 1.9 million pounds of steel standing above them might not be enough protection. They realize that the impossible is about to happen. The ticking clock is stopped. The monster is here. Inside the steel shipping container, the world has shrunk to 20 feet by 8 feet. 12 men. Breathing. Waiting. The air in the box is stale. It smells of sweat. It smells of sweat. It smells of fear. Outside, the hail has stopped. And that is the worst sound of all. Because in a supercell thunderstorm, the hail falls in the downdraft. The area around the tornado. When the hail stops, but the wind picks up, it means you are crossing the threshold. You are moving from the storm, into the mesocyclone, into the core. 4,119 p.m. The sound begins. It isn't wind. Wind whistles. Wind howls. This is a grinder. It sounds like the earth itself is being put through a wood chipper. It is a deep, resonant thrum that vibrates the floorboards of the container. It travels up through the boots of the men. It rattles their teeth. One of the roughnecks looks at the door. The latch is trembling. Outside, above them, the Cactus 117 drilling rig stands tall. 1.9 million pounds. A fortress of geometry. Lattice steel. Engines. Pumps. The derrick towering 150 feet into the violently rotating sky. Then, the sky touches the ground. Physics breaks. The leading edge of the vortex wall hits the rig. We are talking about wind speeds that human beings are not meant to experience. Wind speeds that don't just push, they dissolve. Imagine the sound of a car crash, that screech of metal tearing, that crunch of glass. Now imagine that sound sustained, continuous, for 45 seconds. Scree-gee, for 45 seconds. Scree! Inside the container, the men grab their helmets. They grab each other. They curl into balls on the floor. The light bulb in the ceiling flickers, dies. Pitch black. And then the sensation of weightlessness. The container, anchored to the ground, lurches. It feels like a boat in a hurricane. It lifts, just an inch, then slams back down. Bam! Outside, the impossible is happening. The tornado, a multi-vortex wedge now nearly a mile wide, grabs the drilling rig. It doesn't just push it over, it grips it. The steel derrick weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds on its own begins to twist. Imagine a soda can. You know how easily you can twist an aluminum can in your hand? How it buckles? How it crinkles? The atmosphere is doing that to inch-thick structural steel. The rivets pop. They sound like gunshots. Pop, 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 pop. The massive diesel engines, size of pickup trucks, are ripped from their mounts. They are tossed into the air like toys. And then, the rig rolls. The entire structure, nearly 2 million pounds, is lifted. It is rolled. Once, twice, 3 times. It is being shredded. The noise inside the container is beyond deafening. It is physical pain. The air pressure drops so low, so fast, that the men's ears scream. Their sinuses feel like they are exploding. The oxygen is sucked out of their lungs. They are gasping for air that isn't there. Debris is slamming into the side of their box. Clang. T-yud. Crash. It sounds like they are being bombarded by artillery. One man prays, loudly, screaming to be heard over the roar. Jesus, Jesus. But he can't even hear his own voice. The container dents. The steel walls buckle inward. The roof caves in slightly. But it holds. The anchors hold. The anchors hold. And just as quickly as the violence arrived, the roar shifts. It moves. Away. The deafening grinding fades to a dull roar. Then to a whistle. Then silence. Inside the box, in the dark, 12 men are alive. They don't know it yet. They are too terrified to move. They are waiting for the second wave. They are waiting for the roof to finally collapse. But the monster has moved on. It has eaten the rig. It has chewed it up and spit it out across the prairie. And now, it is hungry for something else. 4:21 p.m. 3 miles to the east. On a muddy service road, a team of scientists is frantically typing on laptops inside a truck. This is the University of Oklahoma's mobile radar team. Their weapon is RaXPol. It looks like a flatbed truck with a satellite dish on the back. But that dish is one of the most advanced pieces of meteorological technology on the planet. It can scan the sky faster and with higher resolution than almost anything else. They are parked on the edge of the abyss. They can't see the tornado clearly. It is still wrapped in that curtain of rain. It's a bear's cage. But on the computer screen, the monster is naked. The radar beam slices through the rain. It hits the raindrops and debris swirling inside the funnel. It bounces back. The data appears on the screen in a splash of pixels. Reds, oranges, and a color that shouldn't be there. Bright, white, pink. The velocity data. Bright, white, pink. The velocity data. Dr. Howard Bluestein, one of the legends of storm chasing, and his team, they stare at the numbers. The software crunches the Doppler shift. It calculates the speed of the particles moving away from the truck. 200 miles per hour. That's an EF4. That's catastrophic. But the number keeps climbing. 230 miles per hour. 260 miles per hour. The scientists look at each other. The blood drains from their faces. This is the oh my god moment. The radar updates again. A subvortex, a smaller, tighter tornado spinning inside the main tornado swings around the southern edge. The beam catches it. 295 miles per hour. Let that number sink in. 295, 475 kilometers per hour. Commercial airliners take off at 150. Formula One cars top out around 220. This is wind moving at nearly 300 miles per hour, just a few hundred feet off the ground. It is the upper limit of what is theoretically possible in Earth's atmosphere. If the wind blew any faster, the friction of the air molecules rubbing against each other would generate heat. It would fundamentally change the thermodynamics. This isn't a storm anymore. It is a blender. And the scientists in that truck, looking at those pixels, they know something terrifying. They know that wind speed doesn't scale linearly. A 300 miles per hour wind isn't twice as strong as a 150 miles per hour wind. The force of the wind is squared. That means a 300 miles per hour wind is 4 times more powerful than a 150 miles per hour wind. It doesn't just push walls down. It atomizes them. It turns wood into sawdust. It turns asphalt into gravel. It turns grass into green mist. And on the screen, the pixels are moving. The bright pink knot of death is sliding northeast. The scientist traces the path on the map with a trembling finger. It's crossed the rig site. It's crossing the highway. It's heading towards a subdivision. Piedmont. 4:25 p.m. The Hamil home. Falcon Lake subdivision. Piedmont. 4:25 p.m. The Hamil home. Falcon Lake subdivision. A bruised greenish black. The sirens are wailing. That sound, the rise and fall of the mechanical siren, it cuts through the humidity. It triggers an ancient primal instinct in anyone who grew up on the plains. Run. Hide. Catherine Hamil is in the hallway. She has the boys. Ryan, 3 years old. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. He's clutching a toy. Maybe a truck. Maybe a stuffed animal. Cole, 15 months. He's heavy in her arms. Warm. Smelling of baby powder and innocence. The news on the TV in the living room is shouting. PIMONT, ta cover now. This is a life-threatening situation. You must be underground. But they don't have a storm shelter. They don't have a basement. In Oklahoma, the soil is clay. It's hard to dig. Many homes are just built on slabs, concrete poured right on the dirt. So Catherine does what she has been taught. She goes to the most interior room, the bathroom. No windows. Small. Stronger walls. She grabs a mattress. Or maybe some pillows. Thick blankets. She puts the boys in the bathtub. It's a standard safety maneuver. The porcelain tub is anchored. It's a shield. She climbs in with them. She curls her body over her children. A human shield. She is their dome. She is their roof. She is their entire world. She whispers to them, "It's okay. It's okay. Mommy's here." Ryan is crying. He senses the fear. He hears the wind outside starting to pick up. It's whistling now. A high-pitched shriek through the eaves of the roof. The lights flicker. Off. Darkness. In the dark, the hearing becomes acute. Catherine can hear the house groaning. The wood framing is flexing. The nails are pulling against the studs. And then, the roar. It's not like the rig. It's not mechanical. Here, in the neighborhood, it sounds like the sky is tearing open. It sounds like the sky is tearing open. It sounds like a freight train, but the train is on top of the house. 4:28 p.m. The monster arrives at Falcon Lake. It is wrapped in rain. It is invisible until it is right there. The outer winds hit the fence. The wooden planks explode. Not break. Explode. They become shrapnel. Then the roof. The shingles peel off like a deck of cards thrown into a fan. The trusses, the wooden triangles that hold the roof up, they lift. The entire roof of the Hamil home is sucked upward into the vortex. Inside the bathtub, the pressure drop is violent. Catherine's ears pop. The air rushes out of her lungs. She holds the boys tighter. She squeezes them until her knuckles turn white. "I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you." And then, the walls are gone. The house simply disintegrates. 1 second, they are in a bathroom. The next second, they are inside the tornado. The wind speed is over 200 miles per hour. The bathtub with the mother and her 2 sons, is lifted from the plumbing. It is tossed into the gray, swirling chaos. There is no sound now, just pure, white noise. The sensory overload is absolute. The brain cannot process it. It shuts down. It is a void. A violent, swirling, debris-filled void. And in that void, gravity loses its meaning. Love loses its grip. The forces are too strong. Physics is cruel. 4:30 p.m. It lasts for maybe a minute, 60 seconds. But that minute stretches into an eternity. And then, as quickly as it came, it is gone. The roar fades to the northeast, towards the highway, towards the north field, towards the next field. At the site of the Hamil home, there is silence. Total. Absolute silence. Total silence. The thou to the hap the hamth. No birds. No crickets. No sirens. Even the wind has stopped. The rain begins to fall softly. It is a cold rain. It falls on a landscape that has been erased. Where there were houses, there are just concrete slabs. Clean. Swept. Look closely at the slab. There is no carpet. There is no linoleum. The adhesive, the glue that held the floor tiles down, has been sandblasted away. The concrete is polished. Look at the grass. There is no grass. There is only mud. The tornado didn't just take the house. It took the lawn. It scoured the earth to a depth of 18 inches. It removed the topsoil. It left a scar on the planet. And in the middle of that scar, debris, twisted metal, shattered 2.4s, a car crumpled into a ball, resting half a mile away. And the silence continues. This is the aftermath silence. It is heavier than the noise. It is the sound of a world that is holding its breath, afraid to exhale. 4:45 p.m. The sirens of the fire trucks begin to wail in the distance. They are coming from Piedmont, from El Reno, from Oklahoma City. The first responders have to cut their way through the roads. Power lines are down everywhere. Trees, stripped of their bark, looking like bleached skeletons, block the asphalt. A deputy sheriff pulls up to the Falcon Lake neighborhood. He steps out of his cruiser. He has seen tornadoes before. He's an Okie. He knows what damage looks like. But he stops. He takes off his hat. He looks at the field where the houses used to be. My God, he whispers it. There is nothing vertical left. Everything is horizontal. Everything is flat. He keys his radio. His voice trembles. Dispatch. We have complete destruction. I repeat, complete destruction. He starts walking. His boots sink into the mud. He is looking for survivors. He is shouting, "Hello, anyone? Can you hear me?" His voice echoes across the muddy plain. Nothing. Then, movement. A few hundred yards away. Someone is standing up, stumbling. It's a neighbor, bleeding, dazed, clothes torn to shreds. The deputy runs to him. "Are you okay? Is anyone else with you?" The neighbor points. He points towards the empty slab where the Hamil house stood. The family. The neighbor chokes out. The family. They were home. The deputy looks. He sees the bathtub. It is not in the bathroom. It is in the field. Twisted, mangled. He runs towards it. But it is empty. The search begins. It is frantic. It is desperate. Flashlights cut through the twilight as evening approaches. Scores of volunteers, firefighters, neighbors, they form a line, a human chain. They walk through the mud. They walk through the debris field that stretches for miles. They are looking for a mother and 2 babies. 5:30 p.m. They find Catherine. She is alive. Barely. She is battered, broken, covered in mud and insulation. But she is battered, broken, covered in mud and insulation. But she is conscious. Her first words, her only words, "Where are my boys?" They preliminarily. "We'll find them, ma'am. We'll find them. You just hang on." But the eyes of the paramedics, they tell a different story. They know the physics of this storm. They know what 295 winds do to a human body. The search continues. The sun sets. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple again. The flashlights bob in the darkness. 6 p.m. A shout from the field. Over! Here! The line of searchers stops. Everyone holds their breath. A firefighter is kneeling in the mud. He is near the edge of the lake. He has found something. He doesn't wave for a stretcher. He doesn't call for a medic. He just takes off his coat. He gently places it over the small form in the mud. It is Ryan. 3 years old. The wind took him. It carried him away from his mother's arms. The firefighter bows his head. He weeps. A few minutes later, another shout. Just nearby. Cole, 15 months old, found. The silence of the prairie returns. But this time, it isn't the silence of shock. It is the silence of shock. It is the silence of grief. The kind of grief that has no words. The kind of grief that has no words. The kind of grief that is heavy. Like the Cactus 107. Unmiles. Back alibi. The sun is gone. The floodlights from the emergency vehicles illuminate the scene. It looks like a war zone. The Cactus 117 is gone. The derrick, that 150-foot tower, is twisted into a pretzel and thrown into the field. The massive engines are scattered like Legos. But in the middle of the wreckage, there is a box. The shipping container. It is dented. It is battered. It looks like a soda can that someone stepped on, but the door is open, and standing next to it, covered in dust, shaking, smoking cigarettes. 12 men. All 12. Alive. Some have cuts. Some have bruises. One has a broken arm, but they are breathing. They are looking at the wreckage of their rig. The machine they thought was invincible, and they are realizing that they are the invincible ones today. Or maybe just the lucky ones. One of the roughnecks looks at the foreman. How? He asks. How are we alive? The foreman looks at the twisted steel of the rig. He looks at the mud-scoured ground where the tornado passed just yards away. He spits on the ground. It wasn't our time, he says. Simple as that. But was it simple? 5 miles away, Catherine Hamil is fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Her sons are gone. 5 miles away, the physics were the same. The wind speed was the same. Why did the steel box hold when the house didn't? Why did the men live when the children died? This is the central mystery of the tornado. It is a game of inches, a game of chaos, a game where the rules of engineering and the rules of luck collide. And in the aftermath, as the scientists arrive to survey the damage, they begin to realize that this wasn't just a tragedy. It was an anomaly. They start measuring the scour marks. They start calculating the trajectory of the debris. They find a tanker truck, a semi-truck tanker, weighing 20,000 pounds. It wasn't just rolled. It was thrown. Airborne. For 1 full mile. The scientists stop writing. They look at the map. They look at the distance. They do the math in their heads. To throw 20,000 pounds for a mile, you need energy equivalent to... They stop. They don't want to say it. But the numbers don't lie. This wasn't just wind. This was a bomb. May 25, 2001. Sunrise. When the sun finally rose over the Canadian River Valley the next morning, it didn't look like Oklahoma. It looked like the surface of the moon. Rescuers and scientists walking into the impact zone stopped in their tracks. They didn't speak. They just stared. We talk about damage paths. We talk about debris fields. But those words imply that there is something left to see. Broken wood, shattered glass, ruined furniture. In the core of the Reno-Piedmont track, there was nothing. The violence of 295 miles per hour is a cleansing fire. It is an eraser. Ground scouring. That is the technical term. It sounds dry. It sounds academic. But let me tell you what it looks like. The grass wasn't just peeled up. The sod wasn't just peeled. The topsoil, the actual dirt of the earth, was removed to a depth of nearly 2 feet. 18 inches of clay, rock, and root system, vacuumed into the sky. Imagine a bulldozer. A massive yellow caterpillar bulldozer, blade down, scraping the earth for 20 miles. Now imagine that bulldozer was made of air. Engineers walking the path found a barbed wire fence. The wooden posts were gone, snapped off at the ground. But the wire remained tangled in the mud. And on the wire, there was a strange fuzz. They leaned in closer. It wasn't fuzz. It was shredded biomass. Grass, leaves, cattle hair, pulverized so fine, exploded with such force that it had impacted into the galvanized steel of the wire. It was fused. You couldn't scrape it off with a knife. The organic matter and the metal had become one. That is the signature of an EF5, the asphalt. On the county roads near the Cactus rig, the road surface was gone. Not cracked. Gone. Large chunks of asphalt pavement, heavy, black, tar-bound slabs, were peeled off the ground like a sticker being ripped off a fruit. Underneath, the roadbed was smooth, polished. This is the forensic evidence of the extreme. When the National Weather Service surveyors arrived, they looked for the indicators. They have a checklist. Die eyes. Damage indicators. Die eyes. Residential home. Destroyed. Die eye. Residential home. Destroyed. Die eye. Hardwood tree. Debarked. Die eye. Industrial building. Leveled. But for this storm, they had to invent new categories of awe. They found a car. A sedan. It was wrapped around a tree stump. But wrapped is the wrong word. It was compressed. It looked like a ball of aluminum foil you crush in your fist before throwing it in the trash. The engine block was missing. The transmission was missing. The only way they knew it was a car was the VIN number stamped on a twisted piece of the dashboard. This is what happens when the atmosphere becomes a weapon. And then, they found the tanker. We mentioned it before. But we need to stop. We need to look at this object. Because this object is the single most terrifying piece of evidence in the history of wind engineering. It was a heater-treater tank, used in the oil fields, a thick-walled steel vessel. It weighed 20,000 pounds, 10 tons. That is the weight of 3 Humvees, or 2 African elephants. Gravity says, this object stays here. The tornado said, no. Surveyors found the tank approximately 1 mile away from its original location. Now, tornadoes move things. They roll things. We know this. But the surveyors looked at the ground between point A and point B. They looked for scratch marks. They looked for divots. They looked for the trail of a heavy object being dragged or tumbled across the earth. There were no marks. The ground was undisturbed. Do you understand what that means? It means the tank didn't roll. It flew. It was airborne. For 1 full mile. The energy required to lift 20,000 pounds and throw it a mile is not meteorological. It is ballistic. It is comparable to a bomb blast. If you do the math, if you calculate the kinetic energy, you realize that for those few minutes, the El Reno tornado was generating power equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon continuously, mile after mile. And yet, why don't we know this story? Why isn't Piedmont 2011 whispered with the same reverence as Moore 2013 or Joplin? Why is this monster forgotten? Because of timing, and because of geography. The timing. Remember the hangover. Joplin had happened 48 hours earlier. The national media, CNN, the Weather Channel, the networks, they were all in Missouri. They were standing in front of the ruins of St. John's Hospital. The world's attention was fixed on that tragedy. When the news broke that another EF5 had hit Oklahoma, the public was exhausted. There is a psychological limit to how much disaster the human mind can process in a week. Tornado fatigue. People turned off the TV. They couldn't take any more. So the El Reno storm, despite being physically stronger, despite having higher wind speeds, became a footnote. The geography. And this is the most chilling part. The tornado killed 9 people. And that is a tragedy. Every single life is a universe lost. The Hamil children. The victims in the cars on I-40. But it could have been thousands. The tornado tracked over open prairie. It hit the oil rig. It hit a few rural subdivisions. It hit a stretch of highway. But mostly, it killed grass. It killed dirt. It tore apart empty fields where cattle graze. It was a monster screaming in an empty room. But look at the map. Pull up a map of Oklahoma City right now. Look at the track of the storm. It moved northeast. If you shift that track of the storm, it moved northeast. If you shift that track just 15 miles, a distance you could drive in 10 minutes. If the atmospheric tumblers had clicked into place slightly differently, if the upper-level winds had nudged the supercell just a fraction of a degree, it would have entered the western suburbs of Oklahoma City. It would have cored Yukon. It would have moved down Northwest Expressway. It would have hit the Baptist Medical Center. It would have hit the Penn Square Mall. And it would have slammed into downtown Oklahoma City at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. Imagine the Cactus 117 violence, applied to a skyscraper. Imagine the ground scouring, applied to a neighborhood with 10,000 homes. Imagine the 2995 winds hitting a traffic jam on I-44. We aren't talking about a disaster. We are talking about a disaster. We are talking about the end of a city. We are talking about a death toll not in the dozens, but in the 4 digits. We are talking about an event that would have changed American history. That is why the meteorologists in Norman don't sleep well when they think about May 24, 2011. They know how close we came. They know that the only difference between a forgotten storm and the apocalypse was luck. Blind, dumb luck. But we cannot leave this story on a what if. We must return to the what was, because for the people of Piedmont, for the Cactus crew, this wasn't a near miss. It was a direct hit. The Hamil family. Catherine Hamil survived. Her recovery was long, painful, surgeries, skin grafts. The physical scars eventually faded. But the other scars, the silence in the house where 2 boys should be laughing, that never fades. But Oklahoma is a strange and beautiful place. In the days after the storm, the fences of Piedmont, those wire fences that caught the debris, began to change. People started tying ribbons to them, blue ribbons. For Ryan and Cole, thousands of them, miles of blue ribbons fluttering in the wind. The same wind that took the boys now carried the memory of them. It was a silent vigil, a way for a community to say, we see you, we remember. And the Cactus 117 crew, they went back to work. Not immediately, but eventually. But eventually, because that is what roughnecks do. They drill, they build, but they changed. You can't walk out of a tin can after being rolled by God's finger and not change. They check the weather now. They look at the sky a little differently. They know that the steel is strong, but the sky is stronger, the legacy. So what did we learn from the forgotten monster? We learned that our engineering has limits. The Cactus 117 was built to withstand high winds. But it wasn't built for this. We learned that radar technology like RaXPol can see the invisible. It gave us the number 295. It proved that wind speeds can reach the threshold of the speed of sound. But mostly, we learned humility. We live in an age of control. We have iPhones. We have AI. We have satellites that can read a license plate from space. We think we have conquered the wild. But once or twice a year, the atmosphere reminds us. It gathers the heat. It twists the wind. It builds a cathedral of cloud that blocks out the sun. And it drops a grinder onto the chessboard. The Reno-Piedmont Tornado of 2011 is a ghost story. It is a story about a monster that walked through the tall grass, unseen by most, violent beyond comprehension, and then vanished into the rain. It is a reminder that we are guests here. We build our cities. We drill our wells. We pave our roads. But we are just tenants. And the wind? The wind is the landlord. Listen to it. It's always there, waiting, for the next time the cap breaks, for the next time the sky turns green, for the next time physics decides to look the other way. This has been The Forgotten Monster. Thank you for listening.